It's a theological world. After all, after all, after all, after all.
Good to be with you. It's a theological world after all. I'm your host, Joshua Farris, and today we're talking a bit about a variety of issues: brain scans, evangelical or ex-evangelical TikToks, vanishing theology departments, and the question of, can we take seriously the notion of souls, spirits, miracles, and even the demonic? Joining us today is Dr. J.P. Moreland, and his answer is yes. Only if we recover a robust, intellectually credible Christian voice in the public square. So in this episode, we're going to explore what it means to believe in unseen entities or realities. And we're going to defend the rationality of miracles briefly and push back against the cultural and academic pressures that are gutting the future of Christian theology. So as you've known before, if you've listened to us, we're addressing the question of why theology really does still matter today. It is truly a theological world after all. And so I'm happy to have JP with us. JP is a professor, a distinguished professor of philosophy at Talbot School of Theology. He's written on a host of topics from consciousness, particularly in his academic work, metaphysics, as well as a whole host of issues that intersect with consciousness on spiritual formation and how it is that we develop a robust, intellectual, Christian interior life. And of course, he's addressed a whole host of other issues that have been formative for me and my thinking, as well as for a host of issues within apologetics today. And so good to have you with us, JP. It's good to chat with you. Thank you for coming on. You've been a great influence in my life, and so I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you.
Well, Joshua, it's my privilege. It's just a delight to be with you, and you've influenced me as well. So,
oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, good. Well, today I wanted to chat with you about a variety of issues, issues that are not foreign to your area of study, your reflection as a Christian intellectual. And here's a sort of a framing question that I want to open up with, and we'll talk about it briefly. Yes. We're told today that minds are illusions, demons are metaphors, and public theology is a lost cause. But what if that's precisely why we need it?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think that I'll start with this issue of consciousness. Consciousness has become a major issue. And the reason is as follows. The Western world certainly holds that the hard sciences have cognitive authority over everything else. I mean, if you can test it and prove it in physics and chemistry, then it's true. But if you can't, you can believe it if you want to, but you have no basis whatsoever. The difficulty with that view is that it has a materialist or physical view of reality. Carl Sagan, the late Carl Sagan, said the cosmos is all there is, was, or ever will be. The difficulty, though, is that conscious states that we have inside of us are not physical. We have sensations like pains, feelings of pain, the taste of a lemon, thoughts, beliefs, desires, exercises of free will. Those are all conscious states. And they all have a what it is like to them. There's a what it's like to having a pain. There's a what it's like to be thinking about London as opposed to lunch. And no physical object has a what it's like to it. There's no what it's like to be a neuron. There's no what it's like to be a brain. And so consciousness is not physical because there are things true of conscious states. I just listed one that aren't true of brain states. So they can't be the same, though they depend on one another and correlate. Now, the problem is this. If you start with matter Big Bang, and then there's physical particles and all the rest of it. And they rearrange to form different kinds of chunks of matter, like galaxies and planets and living beings. You can't get consciousness popping into existence out of nothing. Because you either say in the beginning were the particles or in the beginning was the logos. If you start with the particles, what you're going to get in history are rearranged particles. That's it. If you start with a logos, then you already have conscious mind as your fundamental entity in your worldview. And the subsequent consciousness is very easy to explain then. So that's the reason this has become such a hotbed, because it's something that naturalists and physicalists, materialists, atheists are having a terrible time dealing with consciousness, and it just won't go away.
Yeah. What would you say is so you've brought up qualitative experience,
Yes.
and what it is like quality, and certainly that's an important distinguishing quality to help us arrive at some kind of non-material entity, or at least it's a starting point for thinking about that. What would you say is the strongest or the most powerful argument against materialism today?
Boy, there's so many good ones. You've pinned me to the mat, Joshua. Well, the laws of logic are not physical. You can't see them. You can't touch, taste, smell them. They're not empirical generalizations like all ravens are black, or every time a gas is raised at constant volume, the temperature will raise. Those are empirical generalizations. And that is to say, they're true, but they're contingently true. There could have been a creation where the laws of nature were different, not the laws of logic. You can't have a world where if P then Q and P, therefore Q doesn't obtain. And the laws of logic, therefore, can exist in both material and immaterial worlds. They are not physical. You can't bump into them. And we know them. This is important. We don't know them with our senses. We know them by a grasp of the intellect. So that's a really rough thing for a materialist to try to deal with. And they say, well, we can't. There's no unseen world. Well, what do you do with the laws of logic, dude? I mean, come on. They're unseen, part of the unseen world. So that would be an argument. Of course, the beginning of the universe raises all kinds of problems. You've heard that one, of course. I was at the doctor the other day, and I asked the doctor, do you believe in God? And she said, well, not really. And I said, oh, no. Well, why not? I said, do you believe the universe began to exist? Yeah, sure. Well, do you think something can absolutely pop into existence out of pure nothing? No. Well, okay, then what caused the beginning of the universe? And she just went back to her screen and looked over my chart, but that's an argument that works too, but there are others. Consciousness is one, so yeah.
Yeah, those are good. Yeah, I think, consciousness is important. In fact, your 2008 book, I thought, was really influential on me, and the argument from consciousness. I think that was the first book-length defense of that argument. Of course, there had been other defenses of it in journals and things, but I think that was the first book-length defense. And I think more recently, in the last several years, it seems like we're starting to see more of an uptick of kind of appreciation for consciousness. Consciousness seems to be, even in the kind of the mainstream. This is anecdotal, just from my experience, so it could be wrong, but it seems to be the case that there's an uptick of interest in consciousness, and as well as an uptick of appreciation of consciousness, as if there's what the new age gurus might say is kind of a burgeoning kind of awakening toward consciousness and the kinds of implications that follow from consciousness in the mainstream culture. So it's no longer just this ivory tower issue for academic
Absolutely.
philosophers.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And it's in the culture, and the trouble is that people in the culture, like you've pointed out, are approaching consciousness from a distorted set of ideas that don't allow them to see what it really is and what the implications really are from it. They're clearly theistic, and they're not Eastern, because if you have a pantheistic God is everything, well, he's neither conscious nor non-conscious, according to the Eastern view, at least in some of them. And you end up with no basis for the real existence of consciousness in us. Now, if we're image bearers of a supreme personal God, all bets are off now, because, we have an explanation.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. I was recently having a conversation with a friend and client of mine, and he really kind of nailed this, how important this is. There's a lot of appreciation for consciousness today. There's a lot of secular kind of approaches that are actually moving beyond materialism or some kind of strict or physicalist naturalism view of consciousness. We're seeing more of an appreciation and a kind of tendency to accept views like panpsychism. Now, that's a very technical term. I've used that term, and some of my lay friends have said, "We don't know what that is, Joshua." So you got to explain that. But there has been a kind of growing tendency, certainly away from secular naturalism, as well as away from a kind of robust physicalism or materialism view of consciousness toward other views, which I think is maybe a sign of hope, at least, that something's going on. Maybe. What do you think about that? What do you make of that?
Well, yeah, what happened was, as I said, kind of a more strict materialism came about around the 1930s, and it continued until about the 80s or so. And everything's physical. The problem is, like I said, consciousness just wouldn't fit in. And so more and more then naturalists began to adopt what I call emergentism. And that is that when the brain reaches the right level of complexity, consciousness emerges. And so there's no soul, but consciousness is not physical, and it emerges. The problem that David Chalmers and panpsychists realized was, as I said earlier, Joshua, that means that you're getting something from nothing, because the underlying base is purely brute matter, and all of a sudden you're getting these conscious states emerging. So to solve that problem, they adopted panpsychism, and they've been clear about that, and that's the view. There are different varieties, but that's the view that every individual thing in the world has its own kind of consciousness. So an electron is conscious. Now, it's not aware of being an electron, so it doesn't have the kind of sophisticated consciousness we have, but it might have a primitive sort of awareness of a proton. So there may be a kind of conscious awareness. And a desk has consciousness. The earth is conscious. Now that solves the problem of not getting something from nothing, because now when all of these particles come together to form our bodies, a consciousness appears from potentiality in these particles. So you're actualizing a potentiality. The difficulty is, as Chalmers admits, and that no one has ever been able to solve, is how do you get unity of consciousness from a whole bunch of parts that have their own consciousness? We should be like a crowd at a football game, where each one of us has our own awareness of the field, but there is also what it's like to see the field as a whole. And it's that unified perspective that you can't get from combining little consciousnesses. You're going to end up with really little consciousness folks, like the Mormons think, that stick together. So that's kind of what it is. Everything has its own consciousness relevant to its level of reality, we might say. So that would be that's why it's gaining ascendancy, as you pointed out. Strict physicalism didn't work.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think more and more are seeing that. So that's positive. That's a good thing.
Yes.
I think related to that, I want to stay in this ballpark for a little bit longer, but I want to bring up something familiar that I think you may have seen as well, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. Relatedly, there's this trend away from materialism or strict kind of naturalistic views of agents or persons in the cosmos. There's also been, it seems, this trend that I've seen. It's occurring in America to some degree, but it certainly has occurred in Europe. So I go to Europe and I spend a lot of time, probably more time with academics in Europe, and I've noticed this trend. Like, there's a lot of academic philosophers and religious studies or theologians in Europe who are interested in a broader conception of consciousness and the implications that has for ultimate reality. They're not all that interested in secularism. They're not all that interested in atheism, certainly the hard-nosed kind of new atheists that are kind of falling out of fashion.
Yes.
They find it really, that there's an attitude toward it that it's really not that sophisticated.
Right.
But what I've also found simultaneously is that while there's this growing openness, there's also something else going on relatedly, and that is a kind of undefinable ultimate being. So they're certainly not ready to kind of stick their hand in the ground or draw the line in the sand or say anything really specific or definable about this ultimate being. They believe there is some kind of ultimate being, but one of my friends, I think, helpfully called it, and I haven't seen this written on, but the somethings, right? Rather than the nones or something, or somebody who doesn't believe in anything, there's a growing trend toward believing in a kind of something, a something out there that's undefinable, like maybe what Paul talks about in Acts 17 on Mars Hill.
Yes.
When he defines or when he points to the fact that the people there on Mars Hill are talking about something, but they know not what it is or who it is.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but if a person doesn't want to be responsible for some issue, one of the best ways to let yourself off the hook is to treat the issue as vague. Because how could I be responsible if this thing is, nobody really knows, it's vague, what do you want me to do? I mean, I don't know, nobody knows what to do. And Thomas Nagel, who's a leading atheistic philosopher whom I respect greatly, has admitted that he has a cosmic authority problem. He doesn't want God to exist, and that has played a role in him avoiding some kind of a supreme being that you could know. Now, we Christians cannot just use that as a substitute for giving an argument and giving our case. That's our duty and our responsibility to lay out in the public square what we believe and why we believe it. But still, we need to be honest about it. And that is that I think a lot of people do have this cosmic authority problem. I've been, doing this over 50 years, and I've met, I can't tell you how many people who, if I say to them, well, listen, let me ask you a question. Would you like for Jesus Christ to be the Son of God? Would you like for biblical God to exist? Well, no, not really. Well, then I think maybe we ought to start there rather than with the issues you're raising. And so that would be something I would say, because it's very clear there's a something. And I'm glad to see you reporting that. But that still allows me to be autonomous and kind of, my own, to thyself be true, So that I just find it interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very good. Yeah, I think this question of consciousness and the soul, as it's coming up in kind of more popular discourse in the mainstream, which I think is a good thing, it's still, as you say, it still leaves open the need to kind of further pin down or designate, point to the reality of the God of, well, the God of Christian theism, a
Yes.
particular God, and the God of revelation. Yeah, it's we still need biblical revelation in these in this climate, in this context.
Yes.
So if I want to get a little more practical with you as well and think about consciousness. How do we communicate consciousness to to everyday people? And then also, what does this kind of open us up to? Once we begin to accept that there is consciousness, it's not that far away from actually affirming something like souls and
Yes,
spirits.
absolutely. Well,
And-
you're absolutely right. There have been numerous studies by psychologists that indicate that little children, before they can understand religious indoctrination or anything like that, are aware that they're not their bodies and that they're something that could leave their body. So they're, as one person said it, they're natural born soul people. They just come to know that because they're aware of their souls, actually, and they're aware that they're embodied. But so the soul is an important issue. And just really quickly, I have a whole host of reasons for it, but here's three quick ones. The first one is that conscious states always have an owner. You don't see pains floating around by themselves. It always makes sense to ask, well, who has that pain? Or who's thinking that thought? So conscious states always have a possessor. And the possessor, the most reasonable possessor, would be a spiritual soul who is capable of having consciousness rather than some chunk of matter like the brain, which is not capable as a material object of having immaterial states within it. If it did, it would no longer be just a material object. So ownership, that's one. Number two, free will. If you hold that occasionally, at least, if my wife will let me, I act freely, and I'm aware that that I exercise my volitional will and choose to think about this thought instead of that one. I say, well, I'm going to stop thinking about that. I want to think about this. So, and we hold people responsible because we think that they could have done otherwise somehow, that they weren't, that this was not utterly out of their control what they did. And that's just so intuitive. Now, the problem is, Joshua, that if I'm a brain or a body or something physical, even if that physical thing like the brain has emergent consciousness, the conscious states will do what they do depending upon the brain states that give rise to them. And so the brain will be governing everything. And that means that I am not free because I am a physical object that has to obey the laws of physics, chemistry, and neurology, and so on. So the only way we can have free will, and may I suggest that people know they have that, they know they have that, at least once in a while, would be that if we transcend the physical, and the soul is the best candidate for what that thing could be that would ground our physicality. One more. Persons, human persons, are all or nothing kind of things, like numbers. Numbers are either odd or even. They're either even or they're not even. Number 2 is even, the number 3 is not even. You can't have a number that's 80% even, okay? Well, persons are like that. Something is either a person or not a person. You can't have a 70% person. You can have a person that's functioning 70%, but that's a whole different thing. It's still a whole person. Now, the problem is that my body and my brain can, in fact, be divided and come in percentages. there is percentages. There's a syndrome called Dandy Walker's syndrome. I would encourage our listeners and viewers to look that up online. And these are people that have about 5 to 10% of a brain. If you look inside I have an X-ray of them here, and you look inside their skull, there's a thin layer of brain tissue that's, maybe a quarter of an inch, maybe a little bit more than that, around the inside of their skull, the bone. The rest of what's inside is a sack of fluid. Now, these people they get married, they get jobs, they function. Maybe they're not going to be a professor at a university, but they're able to live a life and think and reason and have beliefs and so on with almost no brain at all. And so what we find is that if I were my brain and body, I would be capable of being a percentage of myself. But I find that to be just unintuitive, incoherent. So those are some reasons for the soul's reality.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. As we think about consciousness and the soul, we realize really quickly that this enters into the realm of what many would consider theology. So this this gets really close to theology and opens up a whole host of, or a whole other side of reality, you might say, a whole domain of reality. So, I'm thinking of miracles and demons, and you've of course written on both. One in particular, miracles.
Yes.
It's a fantastic book, very practical.
Yes.
A simple guide to experiencing miracles or experience miracles. I was thinking about this, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. I've been preparing to teach a course on Ephesians, and of course in Ephesians, there's a lot of debate about to what extent or what we designate the powers that Paul talks about in Ephesians, the authorities of the air, and the language that he uses there. And I've been reading lots of commentaries, going back to lots of commentaries again. And even in the commentaries, whilst many of the commentators are not, they don't deny the realm of the spiritual necessarily, maybe some of them do, but they don't deny the realm of the spiritual. They're kind of hesitating to say much about it, even though the language of Ephesians is so potent in that direction. So I was just reading one commentator, and he was saying that effectively, when it comes to the spiritual realm of demons and angels and the like, it's something that's invisible, that's not empirical. So it would be better if we did not say too much or speak too firmly about it. Effectively, that's something along those lines was his commentary, and I thought that's a little strange. And I think. So I want to hear your thoughts about that, because once we open up to consciousness, we affirm the soul, then it seems like maybe we should be able to speak a little bit more authoritatively about these issues, and we shouldn't shy away from them when we read the scriptures, and the scriptures are talking about these issues.
Absolutely, no revisionism here. I have in the book, A Simple Guide to Experience Miracles, and I'm not trying to sell the book. I just think it would be good for people to look through that. There are clear scientific principles that apply to this issue, believe it or not, about how you can tell if something's a miracle and not a coincidence. And very quickly, if you and I were playing a card game and we were betting $500 on the card game, and I was a dealer and I dealt myself a perfect hand on the first deal, you would know that I cheated. It was not a coincidence. It was done on purpose. Why? Number one, it was unbelievably improbable that I would get those cards, but your hand was improbable too. So what's the difference between yours and mine? There's something special about mine, apart from the fact that I got it. Namely, the rules of the game say that's a winner. Those two together indicate that it was done by an agent and it wasn't coincidence. Now, I've had answers to prayer that were absolutely specific, specific. And they were highly improbable. And they were special because they were exactly what I was praying for instead of praying for something else. Now, that's evidence that there was an intervention by a person, and the only person I know that could pull that off would be God. And so that would be an example of a miracle. There are healing miracles that are breaking out all over the world today. As a matter of fact, in Muslim countries, ministries used to get maybe 50 Muslims converted in a year, and now it's 50,000. I mean, there is an outbreak of turning to Jesus in Muslim countries, and a lot of it is due to the miraculous. People getting healed in Jesus' name, and odd things like that. And I know of healing miracles in my own church. So I could tell you the story if you want me to, but start asking people. There was a Jewish lady that was an atheist a handful of years ago that came to our church that was dying of cancer and was committed to hospice. She was terminal. Her friend was a Christian and brought her to our church. We have a prayer room on Monday nights. And she said, sure, why not? Well, the first 2 Monday nights, Joshua, nothing happened, but she had such a wonderful time, people loving on her, that she came back a third night. The third night, she began, when people laid hands on her, to feel this warmth, like this jelly or something inside of her body, and electricity go from her head down to her feet. And she knew she was healed. And so they said, no, you need to go to your doctor. So she went back to her physician and said, I will pay for you to do another scan of me because I think something's happened. And he came out with that scan and the old scan, and he was afraid she'd sue him. So he said, listen, I know that this early scan was right. I did not make a mistake on this. But something happened, and you can see that you had 51 points of cancer in your body, and now you don't have anything at all. Well, Joshua, about 5 years, 3, 4, 5 years after that, I was asked to be on PBS and talk about miracles. So I contacted her. I got her email address, and she was converted to Jesus, by the way.
Great.
And I said, you don't know me, blah, 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 blah. Did that really happen? And she said, I've got her email right here. So, oh my gosh, did it? And she went over the whole thing just like I had been told by my friends. And she's still on fire for Jesus, and she's still healed. And it's 4 or 5 years later. So that's a healing miracle. I say to people, start asking people in your church, have you ever seen or do you know a credible witness that has told you about a healing? Start doing it. You'll be surprised what you find. Now, demons. Yeah, there's so much about this, but I'll say one thing very, very briefly. I know for a fact that demons exist. I don't just believe it, I know that. And here's one of the reasons why. There are 2 professors at my university, and there was a book that just came out called Demonic Foes a few years ago by a guy who was educated at Princeton, and he's now teaching at an extension of Yale. He's on a Center for Psychoanalytic Theory at Columbia, and he is one of the top professors of psychiatry in the United States. That's acknowledged, even by his colleague. And he has seen what I'm about to tell you. And that is that these 2 professors, they don't know each other, but they both had the experience of having a group of people, 7, 8, 9, 10 people, and he were going to try to deliver an individual from a demonic infestation. And the person began to go around the room and say things about each person that nobody knew. You were in the bookstore this Tuesday, and you were looking at pornography. It was before you went home for dinner, and afterwards, this guy went up and she was spot on with every one of those people. Now that's happened too many times. And I know people to whom it's happened. There's no way that you can explain that as a psychotic break or whatever it might be. So that's one reason, Joshua, that I know for a fact that demons are real, because that is by far the most reasonable explanation of those phenomena. Now, you can also be aware of their presence, and I have been aware because I go to a church that is open to these things. They don't shut it down like those commentaries that you mentioned. And so people at least have eyes to see and to be open to it. And you can become aware of a dark presence. Have you ever been aware of another person? I mean, sometimes you don't just see their body, but you can kind of sense what's going on inside of them. I think most of us have. Well, that's an intuitive awareness. And I think that the same thing happens, that you can sometimes have just this sense of darkness and a presence there that's demonic. And so people need to expand their view and honestly get back to the scriptures, because it turns out they're actually true. And we don't need to revise them so that modern people won't be offended by them. You stay with it and then try to find ways to work out and answer your own questions. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah. No, that's good. Good. Yeah. I mean, I think there's certainly there's demonic presences, but there's also demonic presence maybe in maybe that we could discern through activity in public and
you better believe
in
that's
society, through other religious groups, through politics.
I totally agree. You bet.
Right?
Yeah.
Even if we don't have a direct encounter with it.
Right.
I mean, I think we can still, and as Christians, we should still be discerning about activities that are going on in the world, because it is, I mean, these beings do permeate the world around us.
Absolutely. And they make things worse. Sometimes the flesh and the world are their own evil, but demons can make it exacerbated and make it festering and worse. And this is why we need public theologians.
Good.
Because a public theologian would be someone who has worked hard to gain a good grasp of solid theology, and also keeps their eye on movements of ideas and practices in the culture, so that they see a main part of their calling speaking into that culture. So what they do is they take theology and teaching from general revelation that's consistent with Scripture, and they speak it into the culture and offer a Christian view of things, so that people don't get distorted about, well, Christians believe this. No, we don't. This is what we believe. And by the way, this is what's wrong. This is a trouble with your view. You don't have to be mean-spirited about it, but you can do it graciously, but firmly, and just stand. Now, we need more. The difficulty, in my view, Joshua, is that theology has been taught based on continental thinking for way too long. I mean, Karl Barth and people like that. And with all due respect, he called it church dogmatics. I was going to call it his theology, Christian dogmatics. And the shift was important because he was speaking to the church that already believed, not to the culture. And what we need are theologians that are philosophical theologians, that have some training in philosophy, but they see philosophy as a handmaid or a servant to theology. And so they have a little bit of philosophical sophistication, and they can speak to the culture in a way that is impactful and relevant. Now, may I say, this is why those people that may be watching, and they haven't been to grad school or whatever, this is why they need to listen to podcasts like this. You have to find 2 or 3 thoughtful, intelligent podcasts, and you stay with it, because you have ways of learning. You can read, you can get books on, listen to them in the car that are a little bit thoughtful. Want to read some that stretch you a bit. But in addition to that, one of the greatest things that's happened recently in the last decade or so are podcasts. And I tell you, some good stuff on those podcasts. And I urge people, if they want to be more publicly relevant in their theology, to tune into a couple of 3 podcasts and make them their home.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Make this one your home too. Yeah,
absolutely.
No, yeah, that's good. Yeah. So we've seen more an uptick of what you might call guru types. We've seen an uptick of social media influencers, and we've seen maybe an uptick of what some would call culture warriors. What do you think is distinctive about or overlapping with these different characters from a public theologian?
Well, I do think that we are culture warriors, but I want to be careful how I put that. We don't want to bash people like LGBTQ folk. They've had enough of that from Christians, and we need to care for them and love them. But one way you love people is tell them hard truth. I have friends that have had to look me in the face and say, "Moreland, you blew it, man. That was not a good thing." And they were right, and they were loving me enough to tell me something I didn't want to hear. And I think that we have to do that in the public square. But we don't need to be mean or angry towards those to whom we're speaking. We need to be firm and stand, but be open and gracious. By open, I mean wanting to love and to care for and help people grow out of those things and not compromise what we hold. So in that sense, we're warriors, because we're fighting the world of ideas, as Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, 3-5, that part of spiritual warfare is a battle of ideas. And because demons are persons, they're demonic persons, and persons interact and try to persuade others with ideas. And so they're a part of the deal. And we need to become familiar with those and go after the ideas and be gracious. Now, if somebody's an activist, that's just trying to slam Christianity, I think a strong admonishment is permissible in that kind of situation, because they're not trying to they're not even open to changing, and all they're doing is spewing venom. And I think the proverb says that it's sometimes permissible to mock the skeptic to save the fool. Mock the fool to save the simpleton. The fool is somebody that ought to know better. The simpleton is somebody that's trying to figure things out, and they're being influenced by the fool. I think we have to be careful with that, but I think there is room for that.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, I think one of the challenges in our age is of course social media influencers. Sometimes there's a lot of noise. It's really loud, and a lot of the work, well, at least a lot of the work that's getting attention is loud. It's dependent upon certain kind of algorithmic algorithms online, and sometimes the louder you are, or maybe the more provocative that you are, the more likely you're going to get heard, or you're going to develop a platform. Maybe sometimes it's good, but I think one of the things that I've been kind of chewing on is how what are some good examples of public theologians right now? Are there ones that we can emulate, that we should follow, and how do we regain kind of an influence in the present day with good scholarship? Yeah, with good scholarship backing it, thoughtful scholarship that's backed by research.
Well, I think people like William Lane Craig and some of the theological folk up at the Discovery Institute in Seattle, Washington, that are promoting intelligent design. They have some folks that are speaking into the public square, and not just about intelligent design. I think, honestly, folks like you, and I'm being honest with you now, who have intelligent podcasts. I mean, look, what are you doing right now? You're speaking, you're being a public theologian, and you're speaking into issues by having a conversation with me. And see, I think that one of the great horrors of what you just pointed out about social media is that people stop learning to think about things, and they stop giving reasons for what they're going to say, because, as you pointed out, if you are controversial and have bravado and are loud, you will persuade people, and that is really bad stuff, man. And I got grandkids, and that hits me right in the gut. So what people need to do is to try to at least wean off of that a little bit. Give yourself a break. I'm not saying go all the way off of it. That may be too hard for folk. But wean off and spend your time wisely. Like I said, the best place to go are good, solid Christian podcasts. And I'm beating this drum because I've been on a handful of them that are this is one of them. They're great. And I just wish I wish my grandkids would watch those, But that's what I would recommend people do, is that they start taking on the task of learning their theology and a little apologetics and philosophy. And see, that keeps people from being defensive when they speak out, because often defensiveness is because you want to speak out, but you don't really know what you're talking about. And so you're afraid people will ask a question. And I think, as Peter says, if you learn why you believe what you believe, then you can speak with grace and gentleness, because you don't have to be defensive. You're secure in what you believe.
Yes. No, that's good. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think making learning desirable, enjoyable, practicing it is important. One of the things, this is related to the kind of cult of personality, the social media influencer culture that we've created largely. Yes. We've created it, and it's powerful. It's related, some of it's related, I think, to kind of the low culture, low content way in which we've fed our souls especially since the early 2000s. There have been some recent studies on this. They're fascinating sociological studies, and there's just been a lot of low content, low culture, low production that our souls have fed on for a long time, and now it's pretty normative. You have Jerry Springer culture that has infiltrated much of our entertainment, and it's become kind of normative in our lives. I've noticed this in my daughter. She's 6 years old, and And this is something I'm very cognizant of and trying to counteract. And of course, not just counteract, but provide alternative or replace the way in which she's being entertained, the way in which she's learning. She's gravitated toward, a lot of people call it brain rot on YouTube. There's some brain rot channels, and they're not necessarily like overtly bad, but there's no substance to them. It's all fluff, and she loves it. And unfortunately, and
calm down now.
yeah,
no, I get it, man. I get it.
So I have to push back against that, but also provide alternatives for her, and lead her to hopefully drink from more substantive waters.
Yep.
I don't know, but let's related to this public theology. You've said a lot about that and good things, and I'm still chewing on this in terms of how to interact with the culture today and how to interact through education. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about education briefly. I know we have maybe a few more minutes or so. But education, and I want to think a little bit about education because this is constantly on my mind. The last several years, especially, it's been on my mind as we see school closings. We see a lot of evangelical institutions. I mean, I was raised up in a charismatic environment. I became certainly influenced by what most people would consider, kind of evangelicalism. I went to evangelical institutions, and I'm seeing a lot of institutions that are certainly trimming down. They're certainly following trends that seem to be giving more credence to the administration, and even some schools, surprising at one level, surprising at another level, not surprising. Many schools are just closing. Yes. So a school that I would have considered years ago to be, this is the conservative evangelical place to go, or one of the big ones, was Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. Yes. And you bet. I guess you could say they haven't quite closed up shop, but it's pretty. I mean, they're moving up to Canada, and so in many ways it feels like a closure. It was a season of time where many of the greats who I looked up to, theological greats, apologetical greats, were kind of early on were professors at that school. Anyway, I'm getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but I wanted to ask about, like, going forward. What hope do you see for revival of serious Christian scholarship? Because I'm a little concerned about that, and I see apologetics, the apologetics movement. I'm supportive of it. I see it's done some good. I'm hopeful that it'll continue doing more good in terms of, robust philosophical, maybe theological engagement in the culture. Yes. I'm hopeful that more will take place. But scholarship, I'm not so sure about. Right. Evangelical scholarship, I'm a little. Well, I guess I think it's realistic, but you might say it's pessimistic. I'm a little pessimistic about its future.
Mm-hmm. I understand that. I have mixed feelings, to be honest. I mean, decades ago, Richard Lovelace, who was his church historian at Gordon Conwell, wrote a book about revival and awakening, and he said they never last unless they're accompanied by a renewal of serious Christian reflection and intellectual activity. And I think that's true. It's got to be a both and, of course. But in what you're saying is that there are too many people that want to be respected by secular colleagues than the Lord Jesus, to be quite frank. And so that concerns me. And I think I think what needs to happen besides podcasts is I think that the local church has got to look itself in the mirror and say, gosh, we're the place that really has what it takes to make a real difference. But our people they don't know why they believe what they believe. And we're losing our kids when they go to college. And this isn't going to be for everybody, Joshua, but there's got to be a core of people in every church that wants to think more deeply about their faith, but they don't get the opportunity in their church. And so we're going to have to try to find ways to approach our pastoral staff graciously and say, would it be possible for us to have some kind of a venue where those people who want it could attend a class and read a book together that would help upgrade their ability to speak into the culture and to think more deeply? Our seminaries have got to become more focused, not just on exegesis or interpretation of the scriptures, which is important, but on the culture and how to speak to it. That's your point about public theologians. And we tend not to train people. We're doing that at Talbot, but it's not happening everywhere. And as a result, people can teach the word pretty well, but it's always applied to your individual life and not to issues of our day. And I'd like to see more of that. It's a both and. I'd like to see more of that happening and being taught in the seminaries so that pastors are prepared to speak into that culture. Now, that's a couple of things that have come to my mind and that I've always been laboring for. But, that I'm sure you've got ideas on this as well. But those are just a couple of things I've thought about.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think that's good. Yeah, I think In my article, which this podcast is based upon, it's a theological world after all with Christianity today. I suggested that implicitly that there are different avenues maybe to help bolster good Christian scholarship through apologetics. I mean, I think it's important for popular apologetics, popular apologists to really have more conversations with scholars. Now, I'm hopeful that that will take place, and that they'll be willing. Both will be willing to have conversations together.
I agree.
And I think that's a healthy thing. I think also maybe we do need to become maybe more church-centric in terms of setting up educational institutions, and maybe be more geographically local. I don't know. I don't know all the solutions. I think that could be one way, assuming people see the need, they see the vision. Yes. Just our Christians and our Christian businessmen see the vision and are willing to come alongside and help and be partners together. And I think maybe that's a helpful way forward, as there's a lot of institutional challenges right now with a lot of schools, brick and mortar schools, and I don't know if that'll solve it, but I think those are a couple things that I thought about.
Yeah, we got to brainstorm on this. So good.
Yeah. Before we close out, I know you need to go soon, but what if you had one word for the next generation of Christian thinkers, Christian philosophers, apologists, Christian theologians, as we enter into the new age, the next age, with all the challenges of social media, with the challenges of technology, artificial intelligence, chatbots, and these things, what would you give? What would you give to us? What's your thoughts?
Do not revise the Bible. Stand firm on what it teaches, and don't revise it to please people that don't believe.
Excellent. Very good.
Yeah.
Good. I really appreciate you. Thank you, JP.
Oh, my brother, it's joy. It really has.
Yes, it is a joy, and thank you for your work, and we'll continue the conversation.
Yes, my friend. God bless you, brother.
Bless you. Thank you.